The day aliens realized humans consider Australian vacation a form of relaxation, Commander Sectora had seen enough battlefields to know what true fear was. She'd led reconnaissance forays through the Crimson Nebula where space pirates lurked. Around every asteroid, she'd survived the siege of Kepler-4 for to be where the very atmosphere struggled to break down living tissue. She'd even narrowly escaped the disaster at Proxima Centauri's third moon. But scars on her chitinous exoskeleton still ached during shifts in the weather. So when the Galactic Tourism Board had endorsed Earth as a gentle recovery destination for battle-weary veterans seeking peaceful rehabilitation, she should have had doubts. But she was tired and had let her eyes linger on the brochure, which had seemed so appealing. Green, rolling hills, spotless blue seas, friendly indigenous species busy with what seemed to be recreational activities. Serenity's promised transport ship carried 47 wounded veterans across the galaxy. There was Kron, a behemoth of a Thoraxian whose left arm had to be replaced by cybernetics because of the Battle of Wolf 359. Beside him was Whisper, a translucent veilwalker whose form-shifting shape fluttered whenever she was reminded of horrific incidents. Young Pip, not quite past his Centaurian teenage period, had lost his phase-shifting ability. Through contact with weapons of the quantum variety, they were broken warriors searching for peace. And Earth gave them exactly that. The first indication that something was not quite right was at atmospheric entry. Their human contact, Captain Rex Morrison, greeted them with what could only be called predatory excitement. "GJ mates," bellowed Rex, his weathered face tilted up by a grin which revealed a scary number of teeth. "Welcome to the land down under. Hope you're good for the ultimate experience. Adventure." The word put Zixthera's combat instincts on alert. Veterans didn't journey to rehab worlds for adventure. They came for calming meditation sites and gentle therapy routines. "No offense was meant, I hope," replied Zixthera hesitantly, her translator rendering her clicks and whistles in heavily accented English. "We were promised a nonviolent rehabilitation process." Rex's grin appeared to grow. "Too right. There's nothing more rejuvenating than getting back to nature. We're returning you back to nature, swimming among local sea life, bushwalking through our scenic bushlands, hands-on activities with our wildlife. By the time we're through with you, you'll be feeling like new people." The veterans gazed anxiously at each other. Krone's cybernetic arm buzzed anxiously. Whisper became almost completely translucent. Their first destination was a place Rex referred to as the Reef. The transport floated through indescribably blue water towards a collection of boats bobbing on the surface. Other individuals were already in the water, wearing minimal protection and appearing to be having the time of their lives. "All right then," announced Rex as they anchored down. "Your first therapy exercise. We're just off for a swim with some of our beautiful local sharks." The word sharks did not translate properly, for which the universal translator provided a helpful note. Large predatory sea animals with several rows of razor teeth, causing many deaths among native people. Pip made a sound that was like a kettle whistling. A number of other veterans began what were presumably prayers in their native tongues. "I'm sorry," said Zixthera, her voice rising several octaves. "Did you say sharks?" "To right. Tiger sharks, bull sharks, great whites if we're lucky. Don't worry though, attacks aren't very common. Only had 3 deaths last month, and that was tourists being stupid." Rex began buckling what he called a wetsuit, a bare minimum of man-made material intended to provide about zero protection from something with teeth. Gross Morgoth's Kron echoed, his universal translator struggling with the word. "You mean?" "Gross Morgoth's, and you find it recreational. You can't come to Oz without shark swimming, man. It's like going to Rigel 7 without climbing the Acid Falls." Some veterans winced at the comparison for scaling the Acid Falls of Rigel. The 7th was notoriously a form of ritual suicide among Rigelian warriors. But Rex was already wading in the water, shouting at them to follow. "Come on. The water's beautiful." Today, and I can see some magnificent 2-meter bowls circling underneath us. Next could be nothing more than the most therapeutic fright these people had ever experienced. The human beings swam around with reckless unconcern amidst streamlined predators gliding through the sea beside them. A human Bayan actually extended his hand to caress a shark, grinning as it passed by his hand. "Oh, look at that beauty!" Rex bellowed, wading through the water next to what was, by all appearances, a creature capable of snapping a Thoraxian in two. "She's magnificent, ain't she?" Sci-Fi floated in her safety environmental suit, looking in horrified fascination at the fact that Rex was actually swimming towards the beast. On her homeworld, it was suicidal to approach ultimate predators. Here, it was a hobby. She was able to phase partly out of the material dimension, a nervous habit she had developed since her injury. "Commander," she whispered, barely loud enough, "I believe we may have misunderstood the nature of inhabitants of this world." Just as Sci-Fi could say something, Rex burst through the water next to them, beaming. "How's that, eh? Nothing quite like a pinch of danger to make you feel alive. Crocodile wrestling tomorrow. Anyone?" "Crocodile wrestling," Sci-Fi repeated faintly. "Yes, gorgeous big salties, some reaching 5 meters in size. Don't worry, we'll start you on the little ones, maybe just 3 meters. Good for starters." That night, cooped up in their dormitory, the veterans gradually came to realize the horrifying reality of their hosts. Their gentle native race proved to be a society of beings who took mortal danger for a joke. "That's what they agreed to," panted Pip, his translator struggling under strain. "They literally pay for the privilege of putting themselves at risk." Kron summoned holographic displays from the community infonet. "Just a look at these. Bungee jumping, they leap from mountains attached only to stretchy ropes. Whitewater rafting, they float through dangerous rapids in small boats for fun. Skydiving, they jump out of airplanes for no survival-related reason. Meb religious rituals, Whisper speculated hopefully, rites of passage for their warriors." Sci-Fi had been searching through the cultural database. Her findings were even more chilling. No, these are what they call vacation activities. They work at safe desk jobs for most of their year, and then during their leisure time, they themselves seek out mortal peril. The next day ushered in more horrors. Rex was back again in his customary zeal, leading them to a highly wooded tract which their environmental sensors automatically warned was harmful to a number of forms of life. "All right then, time for a bit of bushwalking. We'll be bushwalking through some lovely bush, maybe spot some of the locals. Mind the drop bears, funnel web spiders, and death adders. Oh, and taipans, lovely animals. Taipans. Their venom can kill a full-grown human being in 30 minutes. The veterans had stopped asking. Answers were always worse than the not knowing. The bushwalk revealed one to the sheer extent of Earth's peril. Each plant looked designed to cause suffering. Rex eagerly pointed out stinging trees whose venom could cause months of woe. Wait a while. Vines that were rich with hook-like thorns, and a thing called a suicide plant, whose name alone seemed to be its mission. But it was the wildlife that most served to bring home their predicament. Rex knelt down by what looked a harmless spider, his eyes gleaming with genuine affection. "Aren't you a little cutie, funnel web spider? Check out the way that her carapace is polished." A bite from her would bring a horse down. T then began to reach for the creature with his uncovered hand. Rex. Sci-Fi screamed, her battle training finally overcoming her bewilderment. "Get out from that Dionge Rosas," looked back in bewilderment. "What? Oh, she's all right. Only attack you if you're a threat. Just watch what I'll do." He crooned at the spider, which stood on its back hind legs in an obvious threat stance. "Aren't she beautiful? Such attitude. You've got to give credit to a creature who isn't afraid to assert itself." Several veterans were hyperventilating. Medical systems of their environmental suits switched on, delivering emergency sedatives into their systems. The breaking point came at lunch. Rex had laid out what he called a traditional Aussie barbecue, which appeared to entail cooking flesh under an open flame in front of animals that could easily eliminate them by several ingenious means. "Now, let's just take a look for huntsman spiders before we eat," Rex stated casually, opening the barbecue lid. A dinner plate spider scurried out, which made Pip literally hover in terror. "Oh, see, Harold, he's lived in that for weeks. Harmless little thingums, huntsmans. Well, their bite's not very pleasant, but it won't kill you. Not that it wouldn't with the redbacks." Rex enticingly shooed the great spider off to a tree, speaking to it like a prized animal. "You handle killer predators like pets," Kron observed, his voice hollow with incredulity. "Harmless, mate. Just grouchy. The lethal ones are the little redbacks. Notice that little beauty in the shelter corner." Rex pointed to a very small spider, almost unnoticeable in the shelter corner. "Pretty little Sheila. Her bite'll get you to hospital without a problem." "And you're not concerned about this?" Zixtera asked. "Why would I be? She's just doing her work. This is her home. We're just visitors. Provided you don't stick your hands where they shouldn't be. Everyone lives in harmony." The agenda for that afternoon was swimming with crocodiles. The veterans had assumed that was a mistranslation. It wasn't. The Northern Australian saltwater crocs were, in Rex's opinion, the ultimate predators. A few were longer than their transport vessel was wide, their mouths large enough to bite a Thoraxian battle mech in twain. They glided through dirty waters, nearly stealthy, until they chose to be otherwise. Now you see, Salty's Rex settled down in waters home to crocodiles, are about respect. They're at the top of the food heap here, and they know it. You leave them alone, they leave you alone. Unless you're a crocodile, of course. Certainly not typically. Whisper's spectral form flickered well. They're sometimes curious, or hungry, or downright grumpy. But that's what makes it exciting, don't you think? Rex then proceeded to demonstrate proper crocodile safety procedures, which involved a quite queasy amount of hands-on handling of animals that could swallow him whole. He called for individual crocs by name and bantered about their personalities as though they were old friends. That's Bertha there, a big softy. A bit temperamental at nesting time, but who isn't? And there's old Tom. He's been around for years. Most probably gobbled a few tourists along the way. But you can't not admire the old chap. The veterans gazed in silence at Rex, who literally reached out to caress one of the monstrous predators. The reaction of the crocodile was to float nearer, appearing to savor the attention. Aren't they just great big softies, though? Now you get to know them. Later in the evening, when the veterans were unable to understand their experiences, they made a startling discovery. Rex was not an exception. He was normal for his race. They were settled by a human woman named Chloe, who greeted them with the same lack of concern for mortal peril. When Pip nervously mentioned the great spider in his room, Chloe only shrugged. "Huh, that's just Steve. He's been living there for months. He keeps the mozzies away. Don't worry about it, he's harmless. Well, almost harmless. He'll bite you and you'll be a little sick, but you'll have to really get on his nerves first." "Might make you sick," reiterated Zixtera. "This is acceptable, yeah. Steve's good people. Good spider. What I mean? The cultural database revealed the utter fright of human recreational activities. They climbed mountains which often sent people to their graves. They surfed on waves which could crush their bones. They explored caves where poisonous gases could choke them silently. They bungee jumped from a bridge, swam in waters with predators, and carried venomous animals for recreational activities. But it was the discovery of something called extreme sports which broke their sanity finally. Base jumping, Kron scanned. From the database, his cyber arm tensing with agitation. Humans jumped themselves off mountains, skyscrapers, and bridges, wearing nothing but fabric wings. Probability of fatality high. Excitement of participants extreme. Free solo rock climbing, added Pip, his voice barely above a whisper. Ascending vertical rock faces without ropes. One misstep, dead. Widely held admirable pastime. Bull running whispers form blurred past. Volunteers stand eagerly in front of charging cattle that can each weigh over half a ton. Ancient cultural tradition. Injuries are badges of honor. Sarah looked at data streams coursing by before her visual screen. Each data point relayed the same message. Mankind was not a race of beings hoping for peaceful restoration. Mankind was a race of beings who had advanced beyond the concept of appropriate fear. Their most shocking find was on the second day. Rex arrived with a new human, a toughly tanned woman named Dakota, who was paraded out to be a wildlife expert. Gajay. Heard you folks were curious about our indigenous fauna? Assumed you might be interested in hearing about a few of our smaller predators. Dakota opened a row of enclosures, releasing animals which made their environmental scanners shriek. Warnings. That's a little beauty. A blue-ringed octopus, Dakota told her, allowing the creature to crawl around on her bare hand. Beautiful, isn't she? Course, she can kill 26 full-grown human adults, but only if she feels threatened. The octopus pulsed with bright blue circles. Something that each instinct cautioned them was a sign of imminent death. Dakota only stroked its tentacles. And this handsome man is a coastal taipan, she continued, uncoiling what looked like several meters of compacted deadliness. Most venomous snake in Oz. Well, second most venomous. Its bite can kill 100 men if it set its mind to it. Dakota handled the snake matter-of-factly, identifying pieces of its anatomy as the snake wrapped its coils around her arm. Magnificent predators, evolutionally ideal killing machines. Gotta admire that sort of evolutionary achievement. You revere them, Zixthera breathed. Those who can kill you. 'Cause I am. They're beautiful animals perfectly matched to their world. That they're lethal only makes them more beautiful. Anybody can be fascinated by a gentle creature. Takes real understanding to be fascinated by a perfect predator. Later that afternoon, Rex produced their last agenda item, a drive to what he called the Outback. Their car zoomed by what looked like endless patches of reddish soil, dotted with thorny bushes, a landscape which looked hostile to all forms of life. This is where you'll get a real dose of what Australia's all about, pronounced Rex in characteristic exuberance. No water for thousands of kilometers, boiling hot temperatures that'll fry you alive. And some of the deadliest beautiful animals on the planet, paradise. They landed beside a small shelter which provided minimal protection from the blazing sun. The heat was suffocating immediately, even with their environmental suits. Local wildlife was of the sort that buried sandpits to snare their prey. Others, which would starve for months but still had the capacity to deliver deadly bites. And something called a wedgie, which was some sort of predatory bird with the capability to knock down prey much bigger than itself. Now, survival out here, Rex explained to them, removing them from their transport depends on a respect for the environment. The Outback won't suffer fools gladly. But if you're smart about what you're doing, the Outbacks are more beautiful. Place on Earth you won't find. They traveled through nations which would have been a trial for an entire army expedition. Rex signaled plants which could survive for years without rain, animals which were thriving in conditions which would be deadly for most civilized forms of life, and landscapes which had remained unchanged for millions of years. It was his attitude, though, which more than anything highlighted the nature of human beings. Rex was not overpowering this environment or merely enduring it. He was enjoying it. He was talking about the deadly heat, venomous animals, and the complete absence of civilized comforts being desirable attractions. You experience a sense of being alive out here that you can't find anywhere else. He explained to us, gazing out across the harsh expanse with obvious affection. Having everything around you that can kill you with a misstep makes you sharp, you know? Keeps you mindful of what it means to be human. That evening, huddled around a campfire by predators during the night with menacing sounds in the black darkness outside, the veterans finally recognized their status. They had not been carried to a rehab world colonized by gentle beings in quest. of peaceful living. They had dropped into a world of a race who had evolved on a world so inhospitable that they made mortal risk a pastime. "Commander," Whisper said, her form nearly unrecognizable in the flickering firelight, "I believe we have made a grave mistake in assessing this race." Zixthera grimly nodded. Aye. Beyond them, the Australian night was full of sounds their environmental suit's threat detection system could not even categorize. Back in the darkness, Rex was enthusiastically explaining each potentially lethal sound for their benefit. "That's a dingo yelping. Pretty sound, isn't it? Pack hunters, as smart. And what's that clicking noise? That'll be a death adder. Beautiful snakes, death adders. Well camouflaged, very fast bite. You wouldn't notice one in time." Rex went on Kron, his cybernetic arm worry and strain. "Don't you ever get afraid Atrex took that very seriously?" "Course I do, mate. Fear is what'll keep you alive. But good and bad fear ain't there. Bad fear paralyzes you. Good fear does what? Keeps you on your toes, pays attention. Out here, you're not a little bit scared. You're not paying attention." Final find was the next morning. In preparation for their travel by transport back home, Rex delivered a lecture which shattered their final illusions about human society. Well, I hope you folks enjoyed your little Oz fix. But that was just the novice introduction. If you want to learn what we're really about, you ought to come back for the expert programs. Volcano hiking in New Zealand, hurricane chasing in America, and ice diving in Antarctica. A pinch of real danger always helps drive home the appreciation of being alive. The veterans looked at him aghast. This had not been dangerous Australia. This had been the first course. "There are more dangerous things," breathed Pip. "You're right. You've only experienced standard tourism activities, child-friendly activities. Wait until you experience what we save for only real adventurers." Rex was comparing human recreational activities, which made shark swimming look like meditation therapy. Humankind seemed to have climbed active volcanoes for recreational activities, swam through cold polar seas for a swim with killer sea mammals, and placed themselves right in the path of intense storm systems. And that wasn't even the crazy stuff, Rex continued eagerly. Solo sailing the Southern Ocean, rock climbing El Cap without a rope, discovering previously unexplored cave systems. There's no limit to what human beings will undertake for a little excitement. As their transport soared out of what they believed to be a _recovery world, the veterans were in silence. On the horizon of their descent was a world by the name of Australia, which was home to people who had evolved to view their world's killing attempts as a sort of entertainment. "Commander," said Crone gently, "I believe we ought to write a report to Galactic Command." Zixthera agreed grimly. "Right, a grave mistake on the Galactic Tourism Board's behalf. Earth is not a rehabilitation planet for veterans who are wounded." "What would you classify it as?" Whisper asked. Zixthera mused on Rex's lack of concern for those who could kill him in a dozen creative ways. She remembered Dakota's careful rearing of animals whose venom could destroy pocket cities. She was reminded of human beings' zeal for activities that would appall survivors of the battlefield. Astrid believes the planet would be the best training grounds for elite special operations units, she declared finally. Those human beings are not looking for trauma rehabilitation. They are actively pursuing it as a lifestyle. The implications were startling. If man vacationed in Australia, a mild holiday destination, what were his true challenges? If pitting his strength against his ultimate predators in a swim was his idea of mild fun, what was his experience of excitement supreme? Much more important, however, was the question of what they could do in time of war. Back on Australia, Rex was preparing his next arrivals. He had a reservation for his advanced Predator interaction package by the Centaurian Deep Space Marines, and couldn't wait to give them a real taste of Australian hospitality. Well, what better way could you be greeted to Earth than a good game of crocodile wrestling and a relaxing bushwalk through Taipan territory? And should they wish to sample human culture at its worst, he'd take them bungee jumping off crocodile-infested water. Rex grinned as he polished his kit. He loved his job. There was nothing better than being able to bring the beauty of Australia to off-world visitors who could actually appreciate the deadly beauty of his home world. Anyway, Centaurians were warriors. They would savor the challenge. Unlike those last visitors, who had appeared frightened of everything, Rex could not to this day understand why they had worried about Harold the huntsman. Beautiful spider, Harold. Would not hurt a fly. Well, strictly speaking, Harold ate a tremendous quantity of flies, and the occasional little lizard. But he was more or less a family pet. Rex beamed to himself as he provisioned for the morrow's expedition. He'd be showing the Centaurians some real Oz wildlife. He had a particular crocodile in mind, a giant of a reptile who had become reckless. Of late, Old Magnus, that was his name. Lovely creature, nearly 6 meters in length and completely unafraid. The perfect introduction to Aussie Hospo. Back on the Serenity's promise, the veterans were drafting their report to Galactic Command. It would be renowned throughout the galaxy. Filed under Critical Species Assessment Updates, and encoded at the highest possible threat level. Its last sentence would be quoted in xenobiology textbooks for centuries to be, "Humans aren't seeking rehabilitation for trauma. They're breeding it." Suggest reclassification of Earth from therapeutic destination. To do not approach without comprehensive hazard preparation. These organisms have weaponized their own leisure time. Most notable sentence of their report, however, was Whisper's own comment, "We came to Earth as broken warriors on a peace quest. We leave as usable organisms who now know that prior combat training was merely preparation for human fun activities." The Galactic Tourism Board would finally publish a full-page apology for the wrongful listing, to be followed by a corrected listing for Earth which began thus. Warning: inhabitants treat mortal danger recreational. Visit only for extreme bodily and psychological trials. Do not recommend for rest. But for Australians and Rex, though everything just continued the way it had always continued. They woke each day in a world that actively wanted to kill them, spent their days around animals who could dispatch their lives by novel means, and accepted this to be the most natural thing in the universe. Anyway, what was the point of being alive unless you were risking death itself? Where was the fun in being alive without a good amount of fear? How could you experience being alive at all unless you were aware of it all the time, of just how easily you could cease to be alive? Were the beliefs on which human society was run, though they never took the trouble to define them. They simply lived by them, day to day, in the informal confidence that derived of being the only race in the known galaxy. To invent their own extinction events for a hobby. Out in the vast nothing of space, other worlds were beginning to learn a sobering truth about their galaxy's newest visitors. Human beings were not just some other intelligent species seeking a spot in the universe. They were the apex predators, who had grown bored with their home world and were looking for something fresh. It wouldn't be the same universe again.